Welcome in, listener. You're listening to a segment from the Slumpbuster podcast with Ju-Ju Dre. Find the full episode on Spotify, iTunes, the Google Play Store, or our YouTube channel. Enjoy. Andrew Luck is officially retired from the NFL. He missed the entire 2017 season. He comes back, has an amazing year. And then here we are in 2018. He's suffering through this weird Achilles, calf, little tiny teeny bone issue. Then suddenly he's gone. Just game 3 of the preseason decides, I'm done with this. I'm tired of rehabbing. I'm tired of the cycle of constantly being hurt, rehab, play, hurt, rehab, play, get hurt again. Offensive line's trash, then they're good. What do you make of this whole thing?
So I will say that it was very surprising. So I was quite surprised when he came out and he announced it. But at the same time, I don't know if I really fault him for that. I think you can have passion for something, but at some point you got to make the decision that's best for your family, right? That's best for you, best for your mental health. And so I'm not too surprised after he puts it in the context of, hey, I was hurt every year, which everybody's always said that. He's one of the best quarterbacks there is, but he does get injured often. He is injury prone. And I don't know if it was issues with the training staff that he had available or just his body, was just more injury prone than other players. But it does suck to constantly be hurt. And so, even myself back in like high school and early college, right, when I would play sports, is injuries definitely take a toll and take your spirit out of you. So I had, back injuries and shoulder injuries. And I still even today live with those problems. And it sucks having, to get out of bed extra slow, or there's days you can't go to the gym. And I can only imagine, right? So like I only did high school sports and then did like intramural stuff through college and all that. So I can only imagine what getting hit by, some of these linebackers is like every single weekend and then trying to, live your life. So.
But also too, like you weren't getting paid $30 million a year to do that. And all things considered, so we were individual sport athletes being in wrestling ourselves. We didn't have an entire roster of 52 other guys, including executives, plenty of sports bettors out there, fans, basically a whole industry behind us. So it's definitely not just Andrew Luck's decision in itself. It's not just a singular decision that affects only him. There is a bit of a trickle-down effect. Now, with all that said, does that outweigh a guy's mental priorities? I mean, I definitely do think that Andrew Luck deserved to retire like he did. I would have just changed it up a little bit. Like, we're talking about 2 weeks before the season. Granted, the more I kind of analyze this, the way the Colts were talking about is he was potentially going to be back by week 1. I don't think that was going to happen. I think he realized that wasn't going to happen. In fact, this was probably going to be a more of a long-term injury at this point, given they were already preparing Jacoby Brissett to be the starter as we grew closer to the season.
Yeah, and so I think you definitely have a point, right? Is there's a lot of guys that, either re-signed with the Colts because they thought, hey, we had a fantastic year. I can't remember. I think they were the team that re-signed all of their free agents this offseason. So not a single person said, nope, I'm out. And I think it's because they bought into the system. And especially if you're, on the offense, you're buying into, hey, I have a really good quarterback supporting me, right? Like if you're a wide receiver, half the time, it's your talent, but the other half is who's throwing to you. Because if you have an awful quarterback, right, like you don't want to be in that system as a wide receiver, and or any offensive player for that matter. So I do think it sort of sucks the way that Andrew Luck did it. It's basically the equivalent to, not giving your 2 weeks notice at your job, right? And so I understand the fans being upset. But at the same time, like I said, to me, I personally can't fault the guy too much. I wish he would have done it better, and then I think it would have been a warmer welcome for him, right? Like, if he had done it at the end of last season or something, I think fans would have been confused and puzzled because they had such a good season, but I think it would have been received a lot better. But now it's, unfortunately, had even fans booing the poor dude, right, after he gave so much to the franchise, and it's because of poor timing. So, yes, I totally agree. The timing was bad and poor. But at the same time, like I said, I understand where he's coming from. I totally get it, especially from a mental and physical health standpoint. And that was the thing that made me the most sort of upset with the Colts fans that booed him, is you have a guy that literally said, like, hey, I'm constantly in pain. I'm looking out for my mental health. And those are the things that we always tell people, oh, you need to value that. You need to value that. But then we're going to boo a guy that gave so much to your franchise, right? When he tells you these are the issues and this is why I'm quitting. And so I personally didn't like that from the fans. I thought that was in poor taste.
Well, I guess, and granted, I don't encourage the booing of Andrew Luck as a whole. I will say that fans are supposed to be erratic. It's supposed to be management that's supposed to be the stabilizing force. And unfortunately, this news wasn't supposed to have been leaked in the middle of the game. It was supposed to be a post-game announcement, at least the way that Andrew Luck had planned it out. And fans, if you're just sitting, you think that they went to preseason week 3 out of just joy for watching a glorified scrimmage? No, they wanted to kind of like see their best players. Even if Andrew Luck wasn't going to be actively playing, they wanted to be there to support the optimism of the season that was about to happen. And that's just all gone. Like, this team, like in our division breakdown just a couple weeks ago, I had them as my division winner. I believe you had them as your division winner as well. Now,
yep.
Now we're talking about a team that will be lucky to win 4 games. Now we'll talk about kind of like what the Colts' future looks like. But not just this year. You were hoping to have Andrew Luck for another 10 years. With the way his injury history was shaping up, I don't think it would have lasted that long anyway. But at minimum, you were expecting to dominate this conference for going on a decade. Chiefs, Colts, similar how we were talking about Brady versus Manning all those years.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely disappointing to see such a good talent walk away so young. And that's the thing is I was listening to, a few other shows and they're saying a lot of the guys that normally walk away that are okay with, hey, I've got to a point where my body's starting to break down, I'm walking away. They've usually accomplished all that they could have. Whereas I think the biggest thing with Andrew Luck is a lot of people still feel like, hey, he still had so much to accomplish, right? As far as winning Super Bowls, I think he probably could have won at least 2 Super Bowls. He's the type of quarterback, at least talent-wise, that could have won 2 Super Bowls. Now, of course, that would have meant his body had to stay healthy for that length of time, post-Brady era, and let's see if he could compete with Pat Mahomes. But it is disappointing to see.
Well, Jim Irsay, their owner, came out and said that it'd be a disappointment if they didn't win multiple Super Bowls with Andrew Luck. Now they're not even going to win one. Now Andrew Luck will go down as never having won an MVP, and it's almost a coincidence that his career is basically going to end the same season that Robert Griffin III's career ends for 2 different reasons. Well, the same reason, injuries, but on 2 different scales.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, luckily for the Colts, they set themselves up well, and this is why we talk about the genius that is Chris Ballard. So last year he went out and traded for Jacoby Brissett, or not even last year, the year before that, gets Jacoby Brissett. Smart decision. This guy is highly touted coming out of the New England system. Now, the year he had to start in Andrew Luck's place, he only threw for 13 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. They had a bottom 3 pass attack. But he was sacked 62 times. I think last year Andrew Luck was sacked only a couple of times himself. So that improvement's on the line. It's going to be interesting to see. Do you think that he can realistically push this team to at least still be relevant in the division?
I think so. I mean, they have a pretty good all-around team, and I've even heard arguments for them having the best all-around team on both offense and defense. The other thing is it always helps when you have more time in a system and you've just gotten more playing experience. I mean, even look at Mitchell Trubisky, right? He had a pretty good season last year, and his first year, nobody would have said that. So I would say on average, the more time that you have, the better you become, at least in the same system for a while. And then eventually people start to see, okay, you are what you are, right? And if you're a bad quarterback, 10 years down the road, it doesn't change that.
Okay, well, I'm going to pose this question to you. Let's say I tell you Jacoby Brissett throws for 24 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. What's the Colts record?
He throws for 24 touchdowns, 10 interceptions?
Mm-hmm.
So he's thrown about half as many interceptions.
For 13-7 the year that they went 4-12.
So I think that would put them probably in that like 7-9 range. So anywhere spanning from 6-10 to maybe 8-8 at most is where I would have them. So anywhere in that sort of 3-game span. What do you think?
Here's the thing. So right now I'm projecting this. So I think it's only fair that we completely redo our division breakdown in the sense of where we see teams finishing. Right now, I project the Colts as a 4-12 team. In fact, I'm going to pretty much take away. I'm going to say they go 1-5 in division now. So whereas I predicted them potentially being maybe 4-2 in division, sweeping division, now I'm going to have to boost everyone up. So if I'm going 4-12 on the Colts, then I got to talk about maybe 7-9 on Tennessee. I originally had them at 6-10. I'm going to move the Jaguars from an 8-8 team and push them up to 10-6. And then when I look at Houston, they could potentially be a 12-4 team and run away with this division now.
I think you're right. I think it does make that entire division, it definitely elevates them, right? Because now you're not playing possibly the best team in the division. Now you're playing possibly the worst team in the division.
Yeah, and I do think that they could potentially still win. I don't think that they'll necessarily get swept in division just because division games are always a bit funky. Like you do see teams snag a win just because you play the same opponent twice. Sometimes you play them twice in 3 weeks and you catch on their game plan and you know how to strategize against them a little better. And NFL's a lot more nuanced in that way of how you game plan for other teams, and any given Sunday is a legit thing.
Yeah, and I think there's also always a weird element when it comes to playing in your division and your division rivals, right? Playing in their stadium. It happens all the time with even like the AFC North, right, is the division that I know the best. Is there's years where Baltimore can have a really, really down year. And let's say the Steelers look really good. They can still go to Baltimore and lose just because it's the sort of division rivalry and the fans are getting crazy on the road and stuff like that. And there's a lot of emotion in those games. So here's how I have it breaking down. Houston, I think at 11-5. Yeah, I guess I would see adding another window there. So 12-4, I don't think is unrealistic. Jacksonville, I had at 5-11. I still don't have a whole lot of respect for them, though I know that they're going to be probably better than I think. I don't know. Maybe for some reason, I'm just overly pessimistic on Jacksonville, or maybe I just hate Jacksonville or something. So I'll say they're going to go 6-10 now. The Titans.
Steelers game a couple years back, Blake Bortles.
Yeah, I'm still very bitter that Blake Bortles beat us, so they're never getting a better record.
At home.
I know. So I have them going 6-10. The Titans, I think, actually go 9-7, and then I'll have the Colts. I still hesitate to drop them down that low to where they're, a potential first, overall pick level. So I'll have them at 6-10. Though I don't know, like, would you tank with this team? You have such a good team, you just don't have a good quarterback.
Well, it's hard to say, too, because we gave Frank Reich a lot of benefit of the doubt because of how well the team performed. But when you lose Andrew Luck, it just completely throws off your entire game plan. We still have to see how good of a coach the sophomore Frank Reich is as a whole and whether he could basically raise this team up from this adversity. They were planning on having Andrew Luck up until literally Saturday. So there still is kind of a mental toll that this is going to have on the team. We don't know if that's going to linger into their first few games or how long it's going to last. But too, you're also, when you go to home, there's going to be a certain lack of optimism. There's a lot of exterior factors that could affect how this team performs on Sundays. Now, here's an interesting question. So if the Colts do finish in that top half of the draft, which I project, in fact, if they finish 4-12, we were pretty much talking about a top 5, top 10 draft pick right now. They luckily would be set up pretty well with next year's quarterback class. So obviously you got Tua coming out of Alabama. He's probably going to be number 1, so they have to be really bad to snag him. Justin Herbert out of Oregon, who could have came out last year, and then Jake Fromm, who's not that exciting, but he's probably going to go in the top 15. So at least they have options in that regard. Do you think that Jacoby Brissett can be good enough to hold off those guys? Or do you think that regardless of anything that happens, they need to be drafting quarterback in the first round next year?
I think regardless, they're going to draft a quarterback first round. I mean, it's also good just to have the insurance, right? Of, hey, we have another first round quarterback on our bench just in case, whoever it is that ends up winning the starting spot. Right now, Brissett, right, is not as good as we need them to be. So I definitely see them going quarterback first round in the draft.
Well, the rules of the modern NFL is if you draft a quarterback that high, he's bound to start during the year. We're going to see that potentially happen with even Daniel Jones this year, who many thought was a project. We saw what happened with Josh Allen the previous year. So if you're drafting quarterback high, you're pretty much expecting them to come in and play.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's Dwayne Haskins, though, right behind Case Keenum.
Which will probably last about 6 weeks before he's starting.
Yeah. I don't know. I think we'll just have to see what sort of happens this year, how it goes. I definitely think if they're in that range where we said they're going to be, right, anywhere from that 4-12 to maybe 6-10 range, I see them going quarterback right away.
Now, I'm going to close our Andrew Luck discussion because, honestly, this could carry like a whole show in itself, just how much of a shock value it was for the league. But I have a bit of a conspiracy theory. Do you think he'll be back? Because I know he had a very emotional presser. I know that there's a lot of emotion. I know, obviously, he got booed off the field. But I still think the thing about what you notice with a lot of these football players, it's their passion is still there. They still have that internal warrior spirit that they want to be out on the field. Let's say he rests this entire year, comes back healthy, new lease on life, feels worlds better. I think you could potentially see it because the last time Luck took a year off, obviously this team was bad enough to grab him a highly touted offensive guard out of Notre Dame, which saved his season, helped him out a little bit. Hey, they're back in the top of the draft. Luck says, you know what? I'm feeling good, guys. Get me Jerry Jeudy out of Alabama, the big wide receiver. Am I too bold in this conspiracy theory?
I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibilities.
Brett Favre fired 3 times.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? We just saw it with Jason Witten, right? Where he's like, hey, I'm done, I'm out. And then now he's like right back in. And I think that's the thing is when you've been doing something for so long and it's the way you've made your living and it's a lot of money, especially at the quarterback position, right? It is hard to walk away. And you're right. I think it was sort of an emotional, irrational decision that sometimes, maybe you're just like, hey, I'm upset, right? That maybe, my ankle, calf injury or whatever it is isn't getting treated the right way or it's just not healing as fast as I want it. I'm done with this. And that happens with players sometimes. Me personally, I don't think so. I think he's done. And I don't know if he's necessarily lost the passion for the sport, but I think he's at the point where it's like, hey, no, I definitely feel that my body has taken too much of a beating, and so it's time for me to walk away. So I think he stays retired.
Well, time heals injuries. Let's see if it can heal the emotional wounds as well. So, speaking of disappointing.
Hold on, real quick, I guess. Are there any other players that you see that might be sort of a risk for early retirement?
No. Okay, so I've heard this argument that will this start a trend of players just wanting to retire early? So there was another piece of news that came out. Obviously, Rob Gronkowski had a very emotional presser himself when he was pitching his CBD business. And he mentioned how he was losing his joy for the sport, how he was tired of all the injuries, how beat up he was from all the hits. But there's only a few players that could realistically can't even afford to retire early. Let's face it, Gluck has already made over $100 million in his career. Those bottom end guys, they can't afford to do the similar things. Even if you're still making $1 million, which is more money than you ever imagined yourself making in a lifetime, I still think that there is kind of like we talked about the sense of identity that comes with these players in their sports. We talk about the financial implications of not just setting yourself up for success, but setting up your grandchildren, your children's children, and so on and so forth for success. I think a lot of players realize that, and if they can play, they'll push themselves out there on the field to get it done. If anything, it could potentially be at the quarterback position. I was listening to Colin Cowherd a little bit, and he was mentioning potentially Deshaun Watson, who's similarly facing a lot of the issues Andrew Luck's facing in his career right now. Could be a option as far as how many hits he's taken just in the early part of his career. But I don't think it's going to be a trend. I think that a lot of people are too bold in making that prediction.
Yeah. So I want to say I agree. I don't know if it'll necessarily become a trend and we're just going to start seeing, players retiring left and right. Though I do worry about one, Cam Newton. He's had quite the injury history, even dating back to college, and he's been taking quite a bit of hits. And then Deshaun Watson was, my other one is, there was a point where he was getting hit so hard that they thought his lungs would collapse if he were even riding on an airplane. And he got sacked like 65 times last year. So,
yeah, I just don't see it. It's possible for like Cam just because his doctors may legitimately tell him no. But the thing that makes these situations different is I think most doctors are of the belief that Andrew Luck would have healed from this and could have come back, and I think that's why he's also getting criticized more from it. A former NFL quarterback came out with a Twitter thread this week basically saying, listen, man, like, it's going to heal. You just got to give it time. You mentioned irrational thinking. He was getting too lost in the moment. I'm tired of this rehab, everything like that. So I think it's going to be a little different. I think it depends on the degrees of injuries these guys face. Like if Cam Newton tears another rotator cuff, or like you mentioned, like let's say Deshaun Watson suffers similar neck injuries or something like Peyton Manning did, something like that. Maybe that could be a big swing pick, but I don't think it's going to necessarily happen. Maybe those two players might be some to highlight, but like I said, we have plenty of topics to cover, so let's kind of like move on forward throughout the show.